All right, let's jump into a report that really grabbed my attention.
Yeah.
It's called The Near-Term Impact of AI on Disinformation.
Okay.
Published just last May by the Center for Long-Term Resilience. And you know what I really appreciated about this one?
Mm-hmm.
It's not just another one of those AI is going to, end of the world doom and gloom pieces.
Right.
It takes a much more balanced look at how AI is really changing the way disinformation is being created and spread.
Absolutely.
So let's dive into this together and see what we can learn.
Yeah, the report goes deep into how AI is being used by different types of actors.
Okay.
And it doesn't just focus on, powerful nations.
Uh-huh.
It looks at the impact on smaller groups, even individuals who might be using AI for disinformation purposes.
That's one of the things that I found really interesting about this report as well.
Yeah.
Was that idea that AI might actually level the playing field when it comes to spreading disinformation.
Yeah.
It's not just the big players anymore.
Exactly. And the report's first key finding is that AI tools are giving a significant boost to less resourced actors.
Interesting.
So it's becoming much easier for smaller groups, even individuals, to create and spread disinformation that can have a real impact.
Do you think that this kind of shift in power dynamics could lead to,
Oh, absolutely.
new kinds of disinformation campaigns that we haven't really seen before?
Absolutely. Think about it in the past. If you wanted to create a really convincing deepfake video, you would need a lot of technical expertise and computing power.
Mm-hmm.
But now there are apps and online services that can do it for you with just a few clicks.
Yeah.
So that means almost anyone with an internet connection can potentially create and spread disinformation that looks and sounds incredibly realistic.
That is a little unsettling when you think about it.
It is.
Are there any real-world examples of this happening?
There are actually quite a few.
Okay.
The report mentions a case from November 2023, where a fringe group that was linked to the English Defense League.
I think I remember hearing about this.
Yeah, you probably did.
Wasn't it?
Which is a far-right organization here in the UK.
Uh-huh.
Used AI to create a deepfake audio clip of London Mayor Sadiq Khan.
Wasn't it made to sound like he was dismissing Remembrance Weekend?
That's the one.
Yeah.
And it almost caused serious public disorder.
Wow.
The mayor himself spoke out about how dangerous this was.
Right.
And, this wasn't some sophisticated nation-state operation.
Yeah.
This was a relatively small group using AI to create a very convincing and potentially damaging piece of disinformation.
That really brings home the point that this isn't some distant future threat.
Exactly.
This is something that's happening.
It's happening right now.
Right now. And it's not just about deepfakes either, right?
No, it's not.
The report talks about how AI is driving down the cost of creating all sorts of disinformation, from fake news articles to, manipulated images and things like that. What happens when it becomes even easier and even cheaper to spread lies?
Well, that's the report's second key finding.
Okay.
And it raises some serious concerns if we think about disinformation as a kind of business, right?
Uh-huh.
Lowering the cost of entry means more players can get involved.
Well,
so it might attract people who wouldn't have had the resources or the know-how before.
So we might see a flood of new disinformation campaigns.
Potentially.
Not just from political groups, but also from businesses, activists, or even just individuals with an axe to grind.
Exactly. And this could have a ripple effect across society.
Right.
Eroding trust in institutions.
Yeah.
And making it even harder to separate truth from falsehood.
Of course.
And one area that the report highlights as being particularly vulnerable is the financial sector.
Why the financial sector specifically?
Because so much of the financial system is based on trust and confidence.
Right.
Imagine a coordinated disinformation campaign using AI to spread rumors about a bank's financial stability.
Or to manipulate stock prices.
Right.
It could have a devastating impact on the economy.
Makes sense.
In fact, there's a quote from a cybersecurity expert in the report that's pretty chilling.
Okay.
He says, "Soon every bank will be a target."
Right. Well, that's definitely given me some food for thought.
Yeah.
But let's move on to the third key finding, which I found really interesting.
Yeah.
It's this idea that AI's impact on disinformation goes way beyond just deepfakes.
Yes.
The report says that AI can be used to generate a wide range of content.
That's right.
From text to images to even cartoons.
Yes, cartoons.
Cartoons, it seems surprising. But
it does.
I guess cartoons can be a pretty effective way to spread disinformation.
They can. They're simple. They're engaging.
All right.
And they often bypass our critical thinking filters because we associate them with entertainment or children's content.
You tend to let your guard down.
Exactly.
When you see a cute cartoon.
Yeah, but it could be subtly pushing a false narrative or something.
Absolutely.
Reinforcing harmful stereotypes.
Exactly. And with AI, you can create these cartoons so quickly and cheaply.
Right.
Tailoring them to specific audiences.
Wow.
Adapting them to current events in real time.
It's like an arms race. But instead of weapons, they're using adorable animated propaganda.
It's a very apt comparison.
Yeah.
And it highlights the fact that AI is not just changing the game, it's changing the entire playing field.
For sure.
So welcome back in the first part of our deep dive. We were talking about how AI is changing the disinformation landscape.
Yeah, really changing the game.
Really empowering all sorts of actors.
Right.
And making it easier than ever to create and spread all this misleading content. But the report doesn't just leave us hanging with a sense of doom and gloom.
That's a relief. I was starting to think I needed to invest in a tinfoil hat.
Yeah, it actually offers some practical recommendations.
Okay.
For mitigating these risks, the authors of the report seem to think we're not powerless.
Okay, that's good to hear.
In the face of these challenges.
So what are some of the key takeaways? Like, how do we fight back?
Well, the first major recommendation is to target the threat actors where they're most vulnerable.
Okay.
So we need to focus on the weak points.
So where are these disinformation slingers, most exposed?
Well, even with all the advancements in AI, actually getting this content in front of the intended audience remains a significant hurdle.
Oh, interesting.
So AI can help you produce 1 million deepfakes, but it can't force people to watch them.
Right.
Or share them or believe them.
So it's like the bottleneck isn't in the creation of the disinformation, but in its distribution.
Exactly.
Like you could have a factory that can churn out 1 million counterfeit bills every day.
Yeah.
But you still need to get them into circulation.
That's a great analogy. The report uses the term dissemination.
Right.
And that's where we need to focus our efforts.
Okay. So how do we go about choking that flow of disinformation?
Well, the report suggests a few approaches. One is restricting the misuse of digital advertising.
Okay.
So right now, it's incredibly easy to target people with misleading ads.
Oh, tell me about it.
Especially on social media platforms.
It feels like every time I scroll through my feed,
I know.
I'm bombarded with ads pushing some crazy conspiracy theory.
Right.
Or trying to sell me a product that doesn't even exist.
Exactly. And these ads can be incredibly effective because they're often tailored to our interests.
Right.
And they exploit our existing biases.
Of course.
So the report suggests working with international partners to develop stricter standards for political advertising.
Okay.
To help prevent the abuse of these platforms.
So putting some regulations in place.
Exactly.
To make it harder for these bad actors to use advertising as a weapon.
Precisely.
Yeah, I can see how that would help.
Another area the report highlights is the need to restrict the misuse of social media accounts.
Okay.
Particularly bots.
Oh, those bots, they're like a plague. You try to squash one.
I know.
And 10 more pop up.
It's a constant battle.
Yeah, what can we really do about them?
Well, the report suggests exploring ways to verify that accounts are actually run by real humans.
Okay.
Not automated bots.
Interesting.
So they call it proof of personhood.
Proof of personhood.
And it might involve using privacy-preserving methods to confirm someone's identity without revealing their personal information.
So, like proving you're human without having to give up your driver's license or something.
That's the idea.
But isn't that going to be really hard to implement?
It's a challenge.
And what about people who have legitimate reasons for wanting to be anonymous online?
Right.
Like activists or whistleblowers.
Yes, those are valid concerns. And the report acknowledges the need to strike a balance.
Of course.
Between security and privacy.
Right.
The goal isn't to eliminate anonymity altogether, but to find ways to make it harder for malicious actors.
Yeah.
To hide behind that veil of anonymity.
Right.
While still protecting the rights of those who need it.
Makes sense.
It's a tough challenge, but it's one that researchers are actively working on.
Okay, so we've got tackling those misleading ads and weeding out those bot armies.
Mm-hmm.
What else does the report recommend?
Well, we know that a lot of this disinformation spreads virally.
Right.
Often through shares and retweets and things like that.
Yeah.
So the report suggests encouraging social media platforms to do more to flag potentially AI-generated content.
Okay.
And limit its spread, especially during sensitive times like elections.
So like a warning label that says, caution, this content may be artificially generated.
Exactly.
Designed to mislead you.
Precisely. And it wouldn't be about censorship.
Right.
People could still choose to view it and share it.
Right.
But at least they would be aware of its potential origins and could make a more informed decision.
I like that approach.
Yeah.
It puts the power back in the hands of the users.
Exactly.
But what about the companies that are creating these AI tools in the first place?
Yeah.
Don't they have some responsibility here?
Yeah, they absolutely do. And that brings us to the report's second major recommendation.
Okay.
Which is leading the coordination of international standards.
Right.
For these commercially available AI tools.
Because right now it feels like the Wild West out there. Anyone can just download an app.
That's the problem.
Create a deepfake, set up a botnet.
Exactly. The report calls for a more proactive approach to establishing these global norms and safeguards for these technologies. Mm-hmm. So it suggests that governments and industry leaders need to work together to develop guidelines for responsible AI development and use.
So it's about putting the onus on the creators of these tools.
Exactly.
To think about the potential consequences and to build in some safeguards from the start.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that AI developers have a responsibility to help prevent the misuse of their technologies.
This is starting to sound a little more hopeful.
Yeah.
Maybe we can get a handle on this whole AI disinformation thing.
It's possible.
But the report also acknowledges that AI is a constantly evolving field.
Yeah.
Right?
It is.
What's to stop these recommendations from becoming obsolete next week?
Yeah.
When someone invents an even more powerful AI tool.
That's where the report's final recommendation comes in.
Okay.
Building capacity to monitor how this threat is continuing to evolve.
So we need some kind of AI disinformation watch group.
Essentially, yes.
Okay.
A team of experts constantly monitoring those latest developments, looking out for new threats.
It sounds like we need a new kind of intelligence agency.
Maybe.
One that's focused on this information war rather than traditional military threats.
It's possible.
So instead of spies, they would have like data scientists and AI experts.
Exactly. This team would be tasked with identifying those potential threats.
Right.
Assessing their impact and coordinating responses with other actors.
Okay.
Like tech companies and social media platforms and law enforcement agencies.
Right.
It's about taking a proactive rather than a reactive approach to this disinformation challenge.
Okay, I'm getting the picture, monitor, analyze, coordinate. It sounds like a pretty big job.
It is.
But I think you mentioned earlier that the report also calls for more research.
Yes. It highlights several areas where further investigation is needed.
Like what?
One is understanding the persuasiveness of AI models.
Okay.
So we've talked about how AI can create this really convincing content.
Right.
But we need to know more about how it persuades people.
Right.
And how to counter those tactics.
I think that's really important. You know, sometimes I feel like I'm being manipulated online.
I know.
And I can't even pinpoint why it's like these algorithms have figured out how to push my buttons without me even realizing it.
That's exactly what researchers are trying to understand. It's this complex interplay of factors, from the way information is framed to the emotional triggers that are used.
Yeah.
And as these AI models become more sophisticated, we need to stay ahead of the curve.
Right.
We need to understand how they work in order to develop effective countermeasures.
So understanding how AI persuades is crucial.
It is.
But the report also points to the need for more research into disinformation for hire businesses.
Yes.
This is where things start to get a bit cloak and dagger.
Yes. These are companies that specialize in creating and spreading disinformation.
Wow.
Often for political or financial gain.
Okay.
So they're like mercenaries for the information war.
Wow.
They're becoming increasingly sophisticated.
It's like something out of a spy novel.
It is.
So we need to understand our enemy.
Yes.
Or in this case, our enemies, and how they're using these new weapons in the information war.
That's a good way to put it. But ultimately, the most important research might focus on us.
Us.
The public.
Okay.
We need to understand how AI is impacting our confidence in information.
Okay.
Our ability to discern truth from falsehood.
Of course.
Our overall trust in institutions.
Because if we lose faith in the very idea of truth,
then
the battle's already lost.
Pretty much.
Which creates a vacuum that disinformation can rush in to fill.
That's the chilling reality we're facing.
Yeah.
And the report emphasizes that this is not just a technological challenge.
Right.
But a societal one. It's about educating ourselves.
Yeah.
Being critical of the information we consume and holding those in power accountable for the responsible use of these technologies.
It sounds like a call to action, not just for governments and tech companies, but for all of us. We all have a role to play in this fight.
Precisely. We're all on the front lines of this information war, whether we realize it or not.
Oh.
And the choices we make, how we consume information, how we engage online, how we hold those in power accountable.
Right.
Those choices will determine the future of our digital world.
It's a sobering thought.
It is.
But it's also empowering.
It is very much so.
All right, so welcome back to our deep dive looking at AI and disinformation. We've talked about some of the immediate threats.
Yes.
And the potential ways that we can push back against them.
We have.
But now I think we need to look further ahead into some of those more speculative long-term impacts.
Yes.
We're peering into the abyss, as they say.
Indeed. And in parts 1 and 2, we really focused on, what's happening now.
Yeah.
Or in the very near future.
Right. But this report doesn't shy away from exploring what could happen in the next, say, 3 to 5 years.
No, it doesn't.
And frankly, some of these scenarios are pretty unsettling.
They are.
So that's what I'm here for, the unsettling stuff.
Okay.
But seriously, though, where does this report take us?
Yeah.
Like, what's the worst case scenario that it's envisioning?
One scenario that really stood out to me is the potential for widespread dissatisfaction with democracy stemming from anxieties about AI.
Interesting.
So it's not that AI will necessarily take over.
Right.
But our fear of its influence could do a lot of damage.
So less robots seizing power and more people losing faith in systems.
Exactly.
Because they think that robots are pulling the strings.
Precisely. Imagine a world where people become increasingly convinced that AI is manipulating elections.
Right.
Controlling the media, shaping public opinion without any transparency or accountability.
Yeah.
That kind of pervasive distrust could erode the very foundations of democratic societies.
It's like that old saying, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not after you.
Exactly.
But in this case, the they isn't even a real they.
Right.
It's like our own collective anxiety about AI.
Exactly.
That becomes the threat.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right.
The more we fear AI manipulation, the more susceptible we become to it.
Of course.
And that's exactly the kind of social fissure that these bad actors can exploit to further their agendas.
Speaking of bad actors, we were talking earlier about those AI-powered botnets that are already spreading disinformation online. The report suggests those could become even more powerful and autonomous in the coming years.
Much more so.
What does that look like in practice?
Well, right now we mostly see these bots as fairly simple tools used to amplify certain messages or harass individuals.
Right.
But as AI advances, we could see botnets that can not only create and spread content, but also engage in conversations.
Wow.
Build relationships with real people, even manipulate online communities. In a much more sophisticated way.
It's a bit creepy, isn't it? Like, it's one thing to see a bunch of bot accounts retweeting the same propaganda.
Right.
But to think that we might be interacting with these bots on a regular basis and not even realizing they're not human.
That's right. That line between human and AI is becoming increasingly blurred.
Right.
And that has huge implications for how we navigate the online world.
Yeah.
If social media platforms fail to keep up with these advancements, these botnets could become a dominant force in shaping online discourse and manipulating public opinion.
Okay, so on top of these evolving botnets, the report also talks about AI becoming even more persuasive at the individual level. Beyond just creating those realistic deepfakes, it suggests that AI could craft messages specifically designed to exploit our own unique vulnerabilities.
Yes. The concept of hyper-persuasion is one of the most unsettling possibilities outlined in this report.
Hyper-persuasion.
Imagine an AI that has access to your entire online footprint.
Oh, gosh.
Your browsing history, your social media posts, your purchasing habits, even your location data.
Right.
And then it uses all of that information to create content that's perfectly tailored to your interests, your fears, and your desires.
So it's like those targeted ads.
Exactly.
That seem to know exactly what you're thinking.
Yes.
But instead of trying to sell you a product,
right,
it's trying to sell you an idea or a belief or a political candidate.
Exactly. And the scary thing is that we might not even be aware that we're being manipulated.
It's playing on our subconscious biases.
Yes.
And desires.
In a way that traditional advertising or propaganda simply can't.
It almost feels like it undermines free will if we're constantly being nudged.
Yeah.
And manipulated by these hyper-personalized algorithms.
It's a concern.
But the report goes even further than that.
It does.
It mentions the potential for AI to simulate entire audiences.
Yes.
And predict how they'll react to certain messages.
That's right. And this is where things get really unsettling.
No.
It means that disinformation actors could use AI to essentially run simulations of their campaigns before they launch them in the real world.
So they're like playing out the entire disinformation campaign in a virtual sandbox before unleashing it on the world.
That's a great way to put it. And it makes it incredibly difficult to counter these campaigns because we don't know what they're planning or how they're going to approach us until it's too late.
It's like we're stuck in this game of chess where the other side is always 5 moves ahead.
Right.
And we can't even see the board.
It's a daunting challenge for sure, but the report does offer a glimmer of hope. It reminds us that even with all of these advancements, AI is still just a tool.
Right.
And like any tool, it can be used for good or for evil.
Right.
The future is not predetermined.
So it's not about fearing AI itself.
No.
It's about making sure it's used responsibly.
Exact.
And ethically.
Yes.
Steering it in a direction that benefits humanity rather than harms it.
That's what we need to focus on.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have.
I think we've explored the immediate threats.
Yes.
The potential countermeasures, the long-term implications of AI and disinformation.
Lots to think about.
It's a lot to process.
It is.
It's certainly given me a lot to think about.
Yeah.
And to our listeners out there, if this has piqued your interest, I highly recommend you check out the full report.
Yes.
From the Center for Long-Term Resilience.
It's dense.
It's a dense read, but it's packed with some valuable insights.
It is.
But remember, stay vigilant.
Stay informed.
Stay informed and stay engaged.
Yes, because the future of our digital world.
Yeah. And perhaps even our democracies depends on it.
That's it for this deep dive.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening.